Okay, so otherwise, if we go to now so it says under general firmware installer, it says is in progress. And let's go to the finite state machine. This is going to show the specific details of the actual deployment. Okay, so while we're waiting for this, I'm going to do the same thing on the other one. So on the other one, we're going to go to from 2.2 to 3.1. And then I'm going to let all of this run. So we're going to take a break and just let the video run and watch the installer. It's going to take some time to run through this. But what I want to show is what's the final result when the system comes back and the new software is actually installed. What happens when we go to acknowledge the chassis, acknowledge the blades, the individual parts inside there, and then where could we run into these problems in the hardware-software compatibility. So from the Java interface, we go to Equipment, then Firmware Management. And if we go to once it loads, we go to Images. And in this particular case, we have let's see, where does it show? I think is it under Packages? Yeah. So under Packages, this shows just what different files are in Flash. So we have the infrastructure bundle, the B bundle, the C bundle, and we have a couple different versions. So we have infrastructure 313A, and we're currently running 222C. And then we have the other bundles that are for the individual servers. So if we open these up, you can see it's got all the specific details of all of the individual parts, like the LSI storage controllers, okay, the NVIDIA network or graphics cards, PCIe cards, and so on and so forth. But it's all just inside this one giant bin file, okay, that I had previously uploaded. So what we're going to do is firmware auto install. We're going to install infrastructure firmware. So right now we're running 2.2. So install infrastructure firmware. Okay, so ignore the problems. Install the infrastructure firmware. And then we're going from 2.2 to 3.1, 3A. A, and again, A meaning the infrastructure pack. Okay, so upgrade now and finish. Okay, so we're going to look at both of these kind of side by side. And on the other one, let's see, I want to see let me see, can I move the description over? I don't think we can. So let me just open this up a little bit more. And we'll see that the new version, so there was a UI change between 3.1.1 and 3.1.3. I'm not exactly sure what particular subrelease it's in. So we'll see that when this comes back, the interface is going to look pretty different, actually. It's the same functionality, but some of the icons are moved around. But the newest version, which, like I mentioned, May 2017, is currently 3.1.3 something. The HTML5 interface is much, much better. And some of those bugs that we ran into the UI, like we couldn't click drop-downs in the HTML interface, most of those issues are resolved. Okay, so no reason really to use the Java interface anymore. Okay, with the exception of what we'll see in this case is that we have older blades. If you have older blades, then you really don't have an option. You have to stay at the older version. Okay, so let's leave the FSM open here. And then what we're also waiting for is going to be the pending activities to start flashing. Okay, pending activities will say, okay, now the file is copied, and we have to reboot in order to actually activate the firmware. So you have to do user acknowledgement to do that. Well, you technically don't have to do user acknowledgement, but in my case, I have user acknowledgement set as the maintenance policy. Okay, so it's going to ask me before it goes to actually reboot the blade servers. There's a question, shouldn't it stop at the check before the upgrade? We had that in a lab that the script stopped the upgrade because of the Gen 1 mezzanine card. I believe it depends on what version you're coming from and what version you're going to. In this particular case, it just upgrades it anyways, and then the end result is it doesn't work. So basically, you can't rely on the system to have the error checks of what is or is not a supported hardware version. You'd have to check the release notes on your own. Okay, so we can see the first chassis says unable to connect to the server. So we lost connectivity. This means that the box, I believe it should be rebooting. Or actually what may have happened is that we probably moved the primary Fabric Interconnect over to the secondary. So let me log in to all of these. Okay, user admin. UCS manager activation and process. Okay, so Fabric B on UCS 2 looks like it's rebooting. And then I want to say the same case should be true for this UCS 1. Okay, so from everybody, let's do a scope to Fabric interconnect. Okay, that guy's going to A. This guy we can't log into. Okay, that one's already there. And then this one goes to B. And let's show firmware. Okay, so this means basically it's in the process of doing the install. Okay, same one here. Okay, so let's try relogging in. And let's see if we can ping them. Ping 192.168.0.100 and 200. Okay, so the cluster is still listening. But it looks like the UCSM's not responding. Okay, so let's go ahead and take a break. I'm going to let the recording run, though, and I'll log back into it once it comes back, and then we'll watch the upgrade process. But like I mentioned, it takes like a half an hour, 45 minutes for it to go through it fully. So just keep an eye on the window here. If you see it shared out here without any of the audio running, then you'll know, we're still in the upgrade process. Okay, but once it comes back, and then we'll resume and we'll talk about the caveats that we can run into here now once the upgrade is done, and then look at what are the differences in the UI. Okay. Otherwise, if you guys have any questions in the meantime, feel free to type those in. But otherwise, we're just waiting for the system to run its installer. Okay, so now we can see that the first pair of Fabric interconnects is running the new version of the UCS Manager. So notice that the tabs previously at the top, they now moved over to the left in the new UI. But same idea, so servers, LAN, SAN, and then administration down on the bottom. So if we go under Equipment and then Firmware Management, and then let's log into the other one as well. Okay, so the other one is still running Java. It's not yet fully upgraded. And we go to Download Tasks. And then Firmware Auto Install. And then it says Firmware Installer is still in progress. So if we go back to the finite state machine, this should show specifically where it's at. So it's still upgrading to about 88%. And if we look at now the installed firmware, it should show us that so UCS Manager Service Pack is 313. The UCS Manager is now 313A. Okay, so previously it was 311. The chassis itself, and let me just keep expanding these. the chassis is still running 3.1.1. Okay, that's the I/O module specifically, and it says that it's still in the process of updating. Okay, so once it comes back with the new UCS Manager version, then it's going to start to push the rest of the infrastructure changes down. Okay, so we should see that the SIMC right now is running 3.1.20 B as in Brian, and then we should see that ultimately once it's done, that these versions are probably going to change. Okay, but additionally, if we looked under equipment and then under just the faults, okay, we can see that there's 75 major faults right now. This is because the system is still re-acknowledging. Okay, so if we go under faults and then let's look at show all, it says that satellite connection absent. Okay, so this means like the fabric extender, which is the I/O module, is not plugged in. This is because it's currently in the process of rebooting. Okay, no link between the network interface port 121 and the fabric interconnect. Okay, so eventually we should see that these faults start to clear. On the first chassis, the one that has all the current blades, so if we go under, let's go to servers, and then, or not under servers, under equipment servers, okay, not the servers tab, so equipment, chassis 1, and then let's go to servers, and let's see, what are the models of these? These are all M3 and M4 blades, which I believe should be fine with this new version. Okay, whereas the second chassis has B200 and B22 M2 Generation 2 blades. That is going to have a problem when it tries to boot up the new firmware version. Okay, so otherwise, let's go back to equipment, and then under, so equipment, firmware management, auto install, and then finite state machine. Okay, so we're still waiting on the rest of the deployment. Okay, so now we're to the point that the Fabric Interconnect is asking us for user acknowledgement, so it needs to reboot the I/O modules in order to continue the process. So if we look at in more detail here where we're at, it says Fabric Interconnect B is now ready with version 3.13. Fabric Interconnect A, which is the primary, is still running 3.1.1e. So basically what it wants us to do, if we go to pending activities, and then we go under Fabric Interconnects, it says the Fabric Interconnect is awaiting a reboot. Okay, so basically what should happen is that when we reboot, there are outstanding faults since the F5 reboot. Okay, we can ignore that. So sure you want to continue, yes. And yes, this is going to apply the changes. Okay, so now it's going to reboot the Fabric Interconnect. So if we go back to the CLI, okay, this was on Fabric Interconnect or UCS chassis number 1. We should see that it's going to, I believe it should be power cycling B, or not power cycling, but resetting B in order to activate the new firmware. And then when it comes back, it should upgrade the A fabric. So basically, the auto install is doing one at a time. Okay, so now under Fabric Interconnect A primary, it's a little bit hard to see with this kind of light gray font, but we can see now it says primary is upgrading, where the subordinate is now running the new version. Okay, so now we can see the fabric interconnects have rebooted again. We're back at the login screen, and we can see now that we're running the new subrelease, which is 3.1.3a. So let's go ahead and launch the UCS manager. Okay, username still admin. Okay, we can see we still have a bunch of faults. So this most likely means that the chassis is still in the process of acknowledging. And so let's go ahead and click on our major faults here. And right now, okay, so it's still talking about link down is going to be most of the issues. Acknowledging the chassis might be required. Okay, so this should happen automatically. So let's go back to equipment. Let's go to firmware management, firmware auto install. We can see that it's still in progress. Okay, so if we go down a little bit further, we should see what it's now doing is upgrading the I/O modules. Okay, so I/O module 2 is running 3.1.3a. I/O module 1 is still running 3.1.1. And we should see that it is going to automatically reboot here once it's ready to go. Okay, so we can see the alarms are starting to clear. It was at 100, now it's at 98. And let's see, our second I/O module is now ready. Okay, so both of them are running 3.1.3a. So we should see now that the chassis is going to re-acknowledge. So let's go under Chassis General. Okay, so virtual interface down, so these ones should be clearing out, which is going to be the I/O module uplink coming up. So let's go under equipment and let's go to hybrid view to make sure that it still sees all the physical parts. So I believe this is going to be under chassis 1 hybrid view, or maybe just under chassis. Okay, so the servers physically are still in the discovery state.